All right, now Rusty, there's some more points that you want to make about grazing milo. So what are they?
Well, so we've established that we're going to not combine the grain and sell it at the elevator. We're just going to feed it to the cattle, let the cattle graze it off. What about the nutrient content of that bushel of milo? So when it goes on the truck and leaves the farm, you just exported a lot of nutrients. But when we fed it to the cattle, we keep that on the farm. Now, it may not all go back on that same crop field where they grazed it because they went back and loafed into pastures or wherever, and that's fine, but those nutrients stayed on my farm.
Right.
So they didn't go down the river on a barge. So there's a value to that.
Because really not that many wind up in the cattle permanently.
Very, very little.
No,
right.
so
when the animal uses it and consumes it,
if you export beef off your farm, bone and muscle, a pound of phosphorus in one whole carcass. I mean, it's a very small amount of nutrient that are in bone and tissue, as opposed to that bushel of grain when it leaves. Nope, absolutely.
All right. So we saving the nutrients. Now, what else?
Well, so quite by accident, we discovered some beef repro benefits. Toxic fescue, which is what a lot of us are grazing. We have
in the fall.
Well, just grazing
year-round
fescue pasture. It has the endophyte, the toxic fescue toxicosis. That impacts, as we know, conception rates, right? Breedback, calving percentages are impacted by that. But we noticed that with our fall calving herd that we had some pretty good conception rates going when we were utilizing this program, and got to talking with some of the beef repro people, and studies show that if you take cattle off of infected fescue for as little as 30 days prior to breeding season, there's a marked improvement in your breeding, in your calving percentages. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we start grazing milo the 1st of November. And with our fall calving program, Thanksgiving or 1st of December, the bulls go in. So without even realizing it, we were taking cattle off of fescue pasture 30 days prior to breeding. And so we just picked up a nice bump in calving percentages from that.
Wow.
And the difference of that one also is if you'll take and start, you want to graze your milo at the beginning of winter. Not so much, it's far easier to keep a cow in condition if she's in condition to start with than try to get her back into condition as the winter goes. But the other thing of it is by doing it, by deferring your fescue stockpile till the end of winter, you won twice. The ergovaline levels have dropped out, and it's really good stuff. You've utilized your high dollar and your high cow day grazing most likely in a system where it's going to be a little drier, and then you defer your winter grazing till late. I mean, but just by dumb luck and accidents, it works out that way, and it's very, very effective.
Well, because several years ago we were talking about how actually feed your hay early and then you do your grazing later. Same thing on tall fescue. Now we're talking about do our milo grazing early, but still do our grazing tall fescue late.
And that makes there's logic in that, because when we put up fescue hay in the spring, we can have some pretty significant levels of toxicity, ergovaline. But we know that decreases over time. So when it's setting in that bale, those toxicity levels are decreasing. So by the time we feed the hay, it's a better forage. Well, our grasses in the fall are the same way. If we do that mid-August nitrogen application, which is what we recommend to boost stockpile fall growth. 60% of fescue growth is in the spring.
Right.
40% of its annual growth is in the fall. So we hit the nitrogen mid-August. We see that big bump of fescue grass, but it has high levels of toxicity. Let's defer grazing until December, January. So we can actually feed our hay on the front end and do our stockpile grazing on the back end. And we've fed 2 lower toxicity level feeds. Now, when we add milo in there, we don't have the endophyte toxicity. Plus, milo grazing is just cheaper than hay all the way around. So.
Sure. And what's your rule of thumb, Harry? You're talking about with don't, if it's -20, just
back to being lazy.
Yeah.
I've been a purist, and I've literally had to go out there with a cordless handheld drill to drill the holes to put my fence posts in. When it's that cold, feed hay. It'll only last for a week or so. I mean, it's at 20 below and 20 mile an hour wind, it's cold.
Right.
Just don't.
But we could, in the years, like you all were saying, hay is cheap. Overbuy, store it inside, and you'll have a 2 or 3 year stockpile.
I hate to give Rusty credit for it, but he's come up with a really good plan for this that makes a good deal of sense. So, come on.
I've noticed a trend with Harry, and that is he just hates to give me credit for anything.
You're right, I do.
I love it. Oh, if you go back to that economic piece, that study, the Iowa State deal, I keep going back to that because it's all about the dollars. And they, out of that study, came up with predictive variables of profit and loss. And so each of the items of cost of production, they gave it a value as how well it would predict the difference in profit and loss. And so the number one predictive value of profit and loss was feed costs. And that was 53% of the predictability of profit and loss was that one item. The second highest item was depreciation, and it came in at 12 or 13%. So what depreciates on a farm? A lot of it is shiny paint, and it burns diesel, and it cuts rakes, bales, and feeds hay. Mm-hmm. You take depreciation and feed costs, those two biggest ones, that's 66% of the predictability of profit and loss on a cow-calf farm. This feed cost, we have got to get our heads wrapped around reducing that. That is the single biggest thing we can do to increase profitability of all our cattle producers. And it turns out to be that way whether you're 33 head or 300 head. Now, more interestingly to me is what didn't make that much difference. Herd size. Less than 2% of the predictability of profit and loss is based on herd size. Wow. So, I run into producers that are just kind of the middle 50%. They're breaking even, maybe making $1 or $2, and they think, man, if I could just get a few more cows, I could get this thing working. It turns out that that's not the case. It's all about the expense of feeding what you got.
It's very interesting. This week I was talking to Jordan Thomas, and I was asking him about his genetics. And he said, really, he's an animal scientist. He says management is more important than genetics even.
You think? Well, yeah.
Yeah, but we tend to want to have elite genetics and don't really do our management correctly.
Go back to the basics, people.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
Environment always trumps genetics. And environment is what you've got and how you handle it. So that's, you can have phenomenal genetics, but if they don't have anything to work with, nothing happens good.
Right. I mean, look at me.
You're an easy keeper, Tim.
That's right. That's right. So now you also mentioned the brown versus green. Let's talk now getting a little bit more of a quality thing.
That I'm going to steal his thunder on this one.
Go ahead.
Okay. I had a friend down in Tennessee told me, said, the secret to green is brown and the secret to brown is green. And I have to give Cook the credit for it because he came up with the solution. But what it amounts to is you need to supplement what you've got accordingly. Our milo is a phenomenal energy source. It is that. But oftentimes it's low in protein, so we need to figure out how to get something added to it, either to graze with it or to supplement some protein to go with it.
But now, wait, that's counter to me because I would think that grain is high in protein.
Mm-mm.
No.
Negative.
It's not as high as we think.
Milo
7%.
is higher than corn, and it runs around that 8-9% protein. Corn runs 7 most of the time.
Right.
So you got protein levels there that you need more protein to balance up the energy. You've got a tremendous amount of energy, and you don't have the protein to go with it to balance off. So it's a addition that needs to happen.
So where are we going to get this?
Pick your poison.
All right.
If you can grow some green with it, that's one of the things we're working on is growing cover crops with the milo. Mm-hmm. To have some green standing there, things like clover or brassicas or oats or anything else that would be of higher quality. You can feed soybean meal, whole soybeans are an excellent. Maybe we grow in the soybeans with the milo. Just the whole bean there would be phenomenal because the whole bean's 38% protein.
Right.
And getting them to stay in the pod so you can get cows. And cows will sure eat them.
Will they?
Oh, absolutely.
They'll. Is it again the kind of acquired taste they got?
As soon as they figure out what they are, they eat them.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you get different supplements you can bring, different supplements you can grow.
Now back on the brassicas you're talking about. So these are annual crops: the oats, the cereal crops, the brassicas, legumes. Just annual crops can be part of it because they're maybe up to 20% protein.
Oh, oftentimes they're higher.
Is that right?
They're very high in protein, very low in dry matter. Guess what you got with standing milo? A whole bunch of dry matter.
So you getting that balance. Now, if I'm just feeding hay though, I'm what? High energy, low protein, that too, probably?
Depends on your hay.
Yeah, completely.
It could be high nothing.
That is
high
close.
fiber.
Yeah, end of June hay. A lot of hay gets put up after Father's Day.
Oh.
You're talking about high nothing, right?
Stored in the best fence rows in the county.
Yes.
You bet. Just,
yeah.
And a lot of that's going your cow manure will tell you what you're doing. Look at the manure. Is it stacking up a lot, a little, splatting good? That gives you digestibility and protein indicators right there looking at it.
So if you can see it out in the field,
if it's frozen and you knock your wheels off driving over it, it's a little too.
So let me
too
add
fibery.
some stuff here. So we've done quite a bit of forage testing on the milo, and we've made composite samples out of what we see the animals consuming, meaning we take some of the berries, some of the fodder leaf, some of the stalk, grind that up, process that. Whether it's wheat stubble milo 10 years ago or full season milo last year, it all comes back 7% protein dry matter basis.
on the whole thing.
That whole composite, what that cow is consuming is averaging out at 7% protein dry matter. I further did some analysis. The grain by itself is 8%. Here's what's interesting. The fodder leaves by themselves, 8%. There's the same protein in those fodder leaves as there is in the grain.
Now, corn wouldn't be that way, would it, Harry?
No.
Because it's an annual,
it died. Corn is bred literally today to harvest everything it possibly can out of the leaf and the stalk and put it in that grain.
right.
So is milo to a point, but the difference of it is it never died. It got killed.
So the biggest mistake, there's two big mistakes I see producers make when they go to feed milo, grazing milo. The first one is they over allocate. They just cannot believe that there's that much feed value in that small of an area, and they always give the cattle more than they need, and the cattle start wasting it. And you'll see the evidence on the ground. There's just stalks and leaves and stuff piled up. We can correct that one. The next one that they mess up on is they don't supplement protein. That is the kicker. Your cattle will fall apart on you. We're in a TDM material that's in the 70s. This is high energy. It's deficient in protein, and you absolutely must supplement protein. Proper digestion is not going to take place. I'm not an animal scientist. I use some animal scientists to help me balance this ration. We came up with bean meal is about the easiest way to go. And you don't have to feed it daily. Cattle can carry that. They can store some of that. We'd feed bean meal twice a week. So you'll find somewhere, get your livestock nutritionist to work with you to balance your ration. But I've seen it come out about a half a pound of bean meal per cow per day, and then accumulate that up to be fed twice a week. So a couple 5-gallon buckets of bean meal spread out. You've got a hot wire there that they're respecting doing this milo grazing. You make little piles of bean meal underneath a hot poly wire. Cattle will line up like a feed bunk and clean that right up. You just feed it right in place in the field.
Or you could do like Harry's talking about and grow a crop with it.
Oh, let's talk about that.
All right.
What kind of luck are we having with that? So we've tried overseeding into milo with aerial application, airplanes, drones. We've done turnips, radishes, collards.
Don't have hardly any luck getting overseeded cover crops established in milo for the same reason, is that it doesn't die.
Right.
It keeps everything shaded all the way
Yes,
into
it does.
freeze, And at that point in time, growing a cover crop can't get it done.
So that's the biggest question I get is most often is, can we grow some of these other high protein companion plants to help balance that when they're grazing it? And the answer is we've tried and tried, and with a full stand of milo, the sunlight interception is just so high that we just cannot. In a cornfield, we can get some leaf starting to drop down, and we can overseed cereal, rye, or different things into a standing cornfield, and you can get some growth. Milo, no, it's going to shade the ground, and you're not going to get anything there.
So we could think about the wider rows.
Okay, let's talk about that.
So we've looked at corn on wide rows with some success. Grain sorghum, I believe your son William has been looking at that, and we're doing some learning. We get about 90% of the grain yield when we did that.
So that does show some promise, right? So to try to go 60-inch rows with milo and then come back in between there with some other products. My trouble with that is, what are you going to grow in that middles that's going to stay green to Valentine's when I'm grazing milo? What's going to hold its protein that long? We can grow some soybeans in there, but by the time we're winter grazing milo, the beans aren't green anymore.
No, they're brown.
Or, they're brown. Or the black-eyed peas, the California black eyes, they're not, they're brown. But now there's the bean, so there's the protein in the bean. But each day I wait to harvest soybeans out of a bean field, we get a dew, and then it dries, and those pods pop, and we start losing. They start dropping beans on the ground. So I don't know. I'm more of a person. I guess I'm more of a monoculturist. I still see the benefit of trying to grow a solid stand of milo, and then we'll bring some bean meal to them, or we'll have a pasture of some back grazing of some stockpile grass, because you can pick up a good bit of protein going back on that grass like that.
Or we could not just have the 60-inch rows, not plant anything with them, but put our cover crops in mid to late summer and get that kale and collards and cereal crops.
Something similar to like the V5 and 6 on corn. Or
right, or just wait. You can wait till August, know.
Now, are you doing wide? You doing 60-inch milo?
Yes, that'd be a 60-inch.
So now what do we do for weed control in a 60-inch milo? So when we have different species, we have incompatibility of our herbicides, and I like herbicides.
Right. Well, by that time, like any type of cover crop, you've got to hope by the end of summer you're starting to play out.
Right, and so then I start to see people put their hats on and walk for the exit door when I start talking about, well, we'll go back to cultivating.
Right.
And they're like, okay, I'm out. I'm done. Sounded good, but
young William got a lesson on that this year.
Yeah. Well, one good thing is the next generation needs to know how to set a cultivator, right. I suppose. How many people don't even know how, right? So that's good.
But that's why we do research, to try to figure out what we can put in that. But you mentioned something else, so you could also have permanent strips.
Oh, it gets interesting, doesn't it?
And they could
see. I'm on the opposite end of him. He's a monoculturist. I basically refuse to do it in a lot of ways. But one thing that we're going to do this time, still searching. A friend of mine did some research, and on the Sorghum Checkoff website, they had information where they had yield checks, and twin row milo on 60s out yielded milo on 30s. So now I've got space to work with. And so we're going to plant the twin row milo with a drill. And we're going to basically have a skip on either side of the milo. And we're going to have 4 rows of the cover mixes planted in the middle. The intention is to get down to the point where we're basically almost on a permanent clover basis. And then we'll just kill it and move over every year 30 inches and plant it in 2-year-old clover. We'll see.
Right. That'd be so. That way you have that green and brown and a high protein source for the winter.
Well, never stop asking questions. I mean, what Harry's advocating to try, sounds a little far out there, but so did the idea of of not combining the grain sorghum
That's
and
right.
letting the cattle harvest it. I mean, if it works, it works, and you don't know if you don't try. So yeah, today's crazy ideas, tomorrow's financial solution. I'm all about seeing our producers make a dollar. Dollar saved, dollar earned, all of that. So if we can cut cost of production, that's great. Grazing Milo absolutely does that.
Now, we've talked all about cattle, but also lambs and sheep and hogs,
Goats.
goats. So let's talk about that now.
They work.
Now, are they as aggressive as the cattle are?
They're not as the sheep are not as aggressive. Sheep and goats are not as aggressive about taking down the whole plant as well. The difference of it is they're way less aggressive about destroying your field. No tilling behind sheep and goats in a grazing program is kind of like a walk in the park. Just go. Unlike the cows, they're going all the way to their knees sometimes in really mud stuff.
Right.
And the difference with sheep and goats is also you're not on a daily graze. We oftentimes set up our sheep fences for a weekly break.
Really?
You can literally give your animals the field on sheep and goats, as long as you'll vaccinate them for overeaters. Okay, give them the whole field. The problem is figuring out when it's gone. So where we move the wire once a week, we know when we get to the other side.
Sheep and goats, they graze the outside. So they'll leave
Outside
the interior. They leave the interior of the field alone. It's not touched at all. My theory on that is that cattle will walk from one end of a Milo field to the other until every bit is stomped into the ground. But they can see over the tops of Milo. Sheep and goats, when they walk into a Milo field, they're blind to seeing the predators.
They're like,
and they don't like that. They will stay on the outside so they can have their peripheral vision, so they can
for
see
predators.
Right, that's my theory. But nonetheless, you'll see that they eat around the outside edges of the field, and it just disappears. They'll make a circle. You put them in a square field of Milo, and it turns into a circle. They just eat around the edges outside and just wander around the outside, and it just disappears.
and there's about a 20-foot line around the whole field from what's 8 to what's not. I mean, that's about as far as they go in to see.
And they won't go in any further.
They seldom will.
Okay, so then you move to
Cattle will actually do the same thing, and people don't believe that. When cattle get into a cornfield, stand still and wait. They're going to an edge. They don't stay in there.
They can't see out.
They realize they're the prey species. Okay, I can't see them. They can see me. We're going to get to where we can see.
Okay,
And they come back out.
all right.
You get the occasional one that wants to disappear in there. Just shoot it and go on.
Now, at your house, Harry, we saw where the sheep were. There were some seed on the ground. What can we do with that?
Look at it.
Or
You just don't.
how about hogs? Couldn't they
I
come
haven't
in?
done that yet. That's happening this
You
year
need
too.
chickens. You need about 5,000 head of chickens.
That ain't
running around
enough.
there.
It'd be 15, probably a couple 100,000. But yes, they'll clean it up.
So, but hogs can clean this up.
They'll work
Chickens.
on it. The pigs will graze the Milo. We'll see how well they're going to go in the mixed grazing system. The idea being is you'll see the Milo coming through in the cattle manure. It won't sprout. But pigs will. It's the age-old practice of running hogs behind cattle and on feed. Hogs clean up the corn that's in the manure. They get some benefit of it. I mean, it's a possibility. You might be able to get a little bit more out of it, make it more effective.
Right. Would you be able? Do the hogs eat the forage at all?
They don't seem to eat much of the leaves.
Okay.
I turned a set of pigs in on Milo this fall, and for the first week I thought, well, that was a complete flop. Well, they figured it out. I come back about 2 weeks later and go, oh, they learned.
Okay.
They put it on the ground, went to eating heads.
All right. So there is a fourth animal that we could have on this. Maybe even fifth.
There's probably not a limitation of animals you can have in this, but it's a matter of making it work.
And the sheep and goats, do they clean up as well as the cattle?
Better. Yeah. They will do a better job of cleaning up berries and seed heads.
They just don't eat as much of the stalk.
They won't eat the stalk. They just don't have the ability to chew that stalk.
Okay.
I mean, they'll work on the leaves to get along fine, but they just won't. I mean, you don't want to force your cows to eat very much of the stalk
Okay.
because you're pushing them too hard.
Now, Milo tillers a lot.
Yep.
So
Depends on when you plant it and what the temperatures are.
So tell us about that.
Well, so that's the beauty of Milo. If you can get Milo to a stage of growth by planting it early enough that the nighttime temperatures are still cool, you'll find that Milo will tiller, and you can get additional grain heads per seed that you planted. But if we plant late enough that the nighttime temps are warm, Milo doesn't tiller quite as well.
Which is what for us? First week of June, second week of June. If it gets too warm, that we got
right. Yeah, I like to try to plant Milo in May. I mean, so you need the warm soil temperature, and Milo will pop out of the ground. Mm-hmm. So it's probably worrying about nothing really.
Sure.
I can take a bag of Milo seed, cost $160. I can plant almost 7 acres with that one bag. So if you're thinking, you're used to getting 2 1/4, 2.5 acres out of a seed corn bag, you can get 6.5 to 7 out of a Milo bag. Whether you try to stretch that population to a little further to count on tillering, if you can, if you get planted early enough, you can do that.
But I was thinking that the smaller stalks might be more palatable for your sheep and goats versus.
You have to be careful with Milo. When you go past your population thresholds, you get nothing.
You get a bunch of fodder, stalks, leaves.
You don't get grain.
The secret to this Milo grazing is you got to grow grain. You put put your grain farmer hat on. You're trying to grow bushels. It's all about the bushels.
All right.
The problem is you just don't get to lie about how much it made when you ran the combine through it.
Yeah.
However,
my fields always shrink when I harvest.
Well, there's one thing we do need to tell people. We figured this out after multiple tries. To yield check your Milo, measure off on a 30-inch rows at 17 feet 5 inches.
Very good. Not 17.5 feet. 17 feet 5 inches.
Go along there and cut off all those Milo heads just below the grain and weigh them.
Mm-hmm.
75% of that weight is the grain weight.
Yeah, we figured that out after multiple rakings and beatings and all this stupid stuff.
But it's a good rule of thumb.
It's almost dead on accurate.
And then you can base your allocation based upon that.
Bingo.
Yes.
You have to.
All right.
That's great. Walk around out there in your field, yield check it. I mean, you can do this that way. A yield check takes nothing for time.
So you can do that in December and January too. Just adjust your
correct.
Mm-hmm.
You know what you got, because if you don't know what you got, you make mistakes.
All right.
Can I leave you with this thought?
Yes.
I get a lot of questions about Milo grazing, and the bottom line is it works. If you're feeding hay right now, and if you're paying $50, $60 for a roll of hay.
Oh, keep going. It's $75.
I know it's much higher than that. But if we're just at $60, you'll find that you're feeding a 1,200-pound cow, 3% of body weight. You do the math, it's costing you $2 a day to feed her hay.
No, it's $250 to $275.
Okay. So you graze Milo, we're down below 80 cents. We're down below 70 cents. Depends on what value. I have producers say, well, I'll grow Milo. I could grow corn. I got to take land out of corn production to grow Milo. Okay. Pay yourself $150 cash rent for the use of that land, and you're still feeding cattle for less than 80 cents a day compared to the $250 you're doing with hay. It adds up in all directions. I get questions about, well, Milo, you have to process that grain before you can feed it to your animals. You get that question. Cattle, sheep, goats will digest Milo just fine.
Hogs.
Mm-hmm. The bottom line to me is this. Are your cattle well fed? Are their nutritional needs met? Yes. They come out of winter looking good. If you're not careful, you can overfeed them very easily, and you can put condition on cattle. I just said that in the wintertime, I can take a lactating cow and I can add condition to her. That is huge. That is the power of this high-energy feed, so you have to be careful. If you want to add condition to a cow, okay. Not sure why you'd want to in the wintertime, right? It's too expensive. So It works. The cattle, they conceive, they calve, they make milk. You sell calves, and you took the single biggest indicator between profit and loss, and I just showed you how to reduce that by half. So we can take the single biggest factor affecting profit and loss, and we can cut it in half.
And what we haven't talked about was background in stockers.
Oh, I would love to do that. But just as soon as you stop and think about how many times a potload of stalkers ran through a 6-barb fence when they got dumped out on a pasture, I don't want to see what they would do to my single hot polywire. Your cattle have to be broke to an electric fence.
Okay.
If you're raising calves and they're yours, or you know where they came from and they respect electric, I think it's a fantastic idea. I'm quite excited to try that, but I haven't yet because I've watched too many flighty groups of stalkers. I don't know, containment could be an issue.
You want to make sure the perimeters are good. and the dead serious, that's the other thing is, if this part needs to be said about this too, eventually cattle will get through the fence and be in the field the rest of the milo. When you show up and that has happened, usually you show up about 30 seconds after it has happened that they went through the fence.
Just leave.
Best thing to do is either sit down and wait for 30 minutes or leave. Let them eat. Now they're full. You can go get them, bring them back out. But if you try to get them right off the bat, you run about 8 days worth of feed in the ground chasing them around. So it's exactly opposite of your first instinct.
Just let them have.
Just stand still and say lots of colorful words and wait.
Or when they have to come back for a drink or something.
Once they get there, they're used to 30 minutes. They're pretty well full. Okay, now we'll get your happy butts back out of there.
All right.
You've never seen an easier group of cattle to work with than ones that all winter long they're standing there waiting on you to move that polywire every morning so they can go in and eat. You can really keep a good eye on your stock. I enjoy the fact that on Saturday or Sunday, catch a day when the weather's nice, go put up all the polywire I need for the next week. You do that one afternoon when the weather's nice and the sun's shining. And then when it's cold and nasty, I'm not plugging a tractor in to start it so I can feed a bale of hay. All you need is a 4-wheeler. Tool down to the field, roll up a roll of poly. Cattle are all single file lined up. They know what the score is. They're ready. It's quite a beautiful thing.
Just make sure that you always have at least the next day's break set up before you leave.
Sure.
Because if you don't, that's when things go bad.
When you have to do both.
Well, when they break out of the one you put them in, at least have the next day set up to stop them.
I mean,
if there's nothing between there and the county road, see, they've got the whole winter's filled.
And just whenever you show up, give them the break.
Yeah.
And everything's calm, cool, settled in. You learn this about doing it wrong 3 or 4 times, and after that you get the point.
So, Harry, if it's so easy, what do you do all day now?
Loaf.
It aggravates me. Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
That's enough.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rusty and Harry.
If anybody has questions, they can always reach me at the extension office. I'll give you that number, 573-564-3733, or email leerw@missouri.edu. Be glad to talk with you about it. I was on the phone yesterday with a farmer in Michigan who is, had heard about this through some of the YouTube videos that we've got out there explaining this process. And so Texas, Kansas, Iowa, Michigan, a lot of people are interested in trying to increase the profitability of the cow-calf.
And you just mentioned Texas and Oklahoma, Arkansas. Southern Missouri in the Ozarks, they can grow grain sorghum.
You bet.
They can do it.
Yes, sir.
Because it's so drought tolerant.
It has a very fibrous root system. It's not a cactus, but it does pretty well. So yes. You'll be surprised. It's not that hard to grow 90, 100 bushel milo, and if you can pull that off, that's worth doing. Yes. I mean, this year it just worked out at our place. Milo was 160. This dryland milo was 160 bushels. There's a lot of cow days and 160 bushels of grain.
And that's probably about the max that you're going to see it yield-wise.
Yeah. I don't know about that. That's definitely on the upper end. I wouldn't expect that. I'm not expecting that every year. 120, 130, somewhere in there is a real good number.
Pretty consistent, yes. That's the key. All right. Well, thank you all. And this is it for Tim's Take.